Well, I'm off of self-isolation.
Yeah, hooray!
Good news.
Good
news, those emergency surgeries I had back in January, everything is healed.
Hey,
yeah, huzzah.
Hey. Yes.
So that's a major plus, and made up for my lack of activity this weekend, that's for sure. We had some great hikes.
Oh, yeah, we have, especially yesterday's hike. But, of course, that hike wiped us out, so it certainly did a number on me. I mean, it's been a long time since I walked 4 miles in one go. So, yeah, but getting back into shape.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Finding that Studebaker in the middle of the woods was kind of interesting.
Oh, that was great. Found some old relics in there and that were abandoned before the area was put aside for recreational use, exactly. And that old grater. Yeah. And when they mention grater, you've got something else in your mind other than what you find. Yep. And what you find is something. It's an old pull-behind grater from the 1930s. It still had the old gas can shot full of holes hanging from it.
The Studebaker was also shot full of holes. And this has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about today.
16 payments and the shooting car's ours. Yep.
Welcome to Unearthly Upstate. I'm Mari.
And I'm Matthew.
And today's subject is, we're going to do true crime again. I am actually surprised this lady isn't more famous now. And we did research real quick just before I record this. I went on my YouTube channel, looked through all my true crime persons. Sure enough, Briefcase did cover her, but he covers historical true crime. Other than 2 other mentions on YouTube, she's not mentioned at all. And I think her crime should make her more infamous than Lizzie Borden.
Absolutely.
This woman, oh man. Let me give you an example of how famous she was at the time when she was alive. This is from the Poughkeepsie Evening Enterprise, and it's spelled Poughkeepsie, okay? February 7th, 1898. Page 1, so she's on the first page.
Wow.
Lizzie Haliday's store teeth. Lizzie Haliday, the murderess, who is serving the life sentence at the Matawan State Hospital, went to Fishkill Landing on Saturday with matron Hess and received her new set of false teeth. Mrs. Haliday was recognized by citizens as soon as a motley gathering was in the neighborhood of the dentist office on Main Street. Mrs. Haliday opened her mouth to show the store teeth to the crowd, and she seemed much pleased with them. The notorious woman appeared to enjoy her outing immensely and wore a broad grin all over her face.
And asked the crowd, where can I find the nearest steakhouse?
Yeah. But here's an example. She was getting false teeth fit, and it makes first page news. This is how famous she was at the time. Or I should say, infamous. Lizzie Haliday, a female serial killer who does not fit the mold of female serial killers. The closest you're going to get is Arlene, how do you say her last name, Voorhouse?
Something like that.
Yeah, that's the closest. But even, I can't put her in the same level as her, as Arlene, because one killed men because she had a perceived threat of men. Lizzie killed.
Yeah.
First of all, you're going to find out, I don't think gender mattered to her.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
The kind of person that Lizzie Haliday was. Mm-hmm. Lizzie Haliday was an equal opportunity destroyer.
Yes.
She sometimes didn't just murder people. She vaporized them.
Yeah.
And you're going to find out later on just how many whacks she gave this other person. But
oh, man. She's... Whew. That's why I'm like, when people say, that murderer Lizzie, I'm not going to think of Lizzie Borden anymore. I'm going to think of this lady. Okay.
Yeah, Lizzie Haliday puts Borden to shame.
Yes.
Oh my goodness sakes! As far as sheer body count, Lizzie Haliday's pile of skulls is definitely higher.
Oh, man.
Than, any of these other female serial killers.
Oof.
I mean, and so much so that she was almost placed at the scene of the crime with the Jack the Ripper murders.
Maybe.
Some of the timeline doesn't fit.
We'll discuss
but that's
that.
just to whet your appetite.
So we'll talk about timeline. Well, let's start at the beginning, right? Well, in 1857, she was born in Ireland. She was one of 10 children. I couldn't get where she was in the 10 children lineup, but they moved their entire family over to New York City, to be exact. Either in 1860 or 1868, from what I understand that the sources, the family weren't sure if she was 3 or 8 when they moved. Now, me and you were both from large families.
Well, she's one child of 10.
Yeah, me and you are from large families. You know how easy it is for your parents to forget where you are, and how old you are in the lineup.
That's the entire premise that set up Home Alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but in this case, they can't remember how old she was when they moved to New York City, and you don't hear much about that. Apparently, in 1887, she went back to Ireland one time and murdered somebody, or that's what she claimed. I couldn't find anything other than what people said. That's what Lizzie said. I couldn't find any proof that she'd went to Ireland before the rest of this starts.
Well, by the late 19th century, things were getting better for the Irish.
Yeah.
White slavery wasn't so much a thing for them anymore. They were getting better respect in the United States.
The indentured servitude happened, and then you had Tammany Hall, and there was things changing at this point, but you still had the perception of the Irish as being violent and the drunkards and horrible Catholics, even if they were Protestant, and there was still that, but it wasn't as it was calming down. Pretty soon you're going to have the
line on the bell curve of racism against Irish people was on the dip.
Down. And then pretty soon we're all going to get drunk on March 17th, and I'll pretend to be Irish, about 100 years later. So it was on that way down, but she was still, think of the time period. This is the late 1800s. She doesn't have much employment aspects because she's poor, she's Irish, so she gets to marrying.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
In 1879, she marries Ketspul Brown, who was also known as Charles Hopkins. This was her first husband. They did have a child together, a son, but he died suddenly. And at the time it said natural causes, but then later on, just like in the one that's going on now with Vallow in Daybell, let's reopen his case and take a look. But
this could have been Lizzie's first murder.
It could have been. Some historians say it was, but there's really no proof to prove it was hers. She's a single mom now. She's got a young child. What does she do? Well, she marries again. So she marries in 1881 to Artemis Brewster, who dies within a year of the marriage.
Very suspicious.
Now, we're going to go into a big discussion of this later, but I want you to notice there's been no claims of insurance money. There's been no sign that she inherited anything at this point.
At this point, in the development of a serial killer, they're just beginning to become that sort of
she's testing the waters.
Exactly. She's just beginning to get her feet wet as a serial killer, and they're not very confident at that point, and they might even be a bit sloppy.
And because she's female serial killers have different motivations than male serial killers. Female serial killers usually financial. That's why I mentioned at this point there's no proof she was doing it for insurance. At this point there's no sign that she was inheriting a lot of money. And if she's killing these guys, first of all, why is she doing that with a young son in tow? Because that's going to cause her more financial hardship at this point, being a woman at this time. So we can't say it's financial motivation. Maybe it's a caretaker type, like the one we discussed last season, where it's a person in the caretaking point of view. A few of them that we're going to talk about, I'm going to say that was probably the motivation. She was in the caretaker mindset. Whether it was the Munchausen by proxy, we don't know. There's not enough to go by to discuss that with.
She didn't complain that her child was constantly ill either.
No.
And getting attention through the child.
But we might as well mention now, at some point, she does lose custody of the child, and that child ends up institutionalized. And we don't know who the child was. We don't have any records of their name. We have nothing. So it was one of these people that have gotten lost. We've talked about that in these asylums, how a lot of people ended up there and just disappeared, and it looks like that's what happened to her son. So
lost in the system.
Lost in the system. We're up to Artemis. He dies. And then she marries, I don't have a year on this, Hiram Parkinson. And some sources say they separated, but the thing is, he disappeared. He did leave her, but no one was able to find him. Could this have been murder too? Possibly.
Or could he have just bolted?
He could have bolted too.
Yeah,
Yeah. The next person is George Smith, who was a friend of Brewster, her second husband. And she tried to poison him.
Arsenic.
He did not even let her have a second chance. It was the end of the marriage. Gone.
Yep.
Bye, Lizzie. Bye. So Charles survived. Charles lived, and she had to move on quickly. Mm-hmm. And then we get to...
why she was not brought in at that point.
That's interesting, yeah. I think there was a bit of investigation, but she started feigning the insanity at that point, or maybe she was insane. We'll discuss that too. Was this all a big act, or was she really crazy? Mm-hmm. So then, again, I don't have a year on this. She marries a Charles Playstill for only 2 weeks, and she took off. So he dodged a major bullet.
big bullet.
And now she disappears. And now so far, she's been bouncing around between Pennsylvania and Vermont. Vermont was the last place she'd seen, where she married the guy for 2 weeks and took off. Some sources said they weren't even sure they were married, but she definitely was living with him for 2 weeks and then took off. She disappears. Nobody knows where she goes to. But then she shows up in Philadelphia in 1888, March of 1888. Keep that date in mind, because we're going to discuss the timeline of Jack the Ripper and why it just doesn't work out. So March of 1888, she shows up in Philadelphia, and some friends of hers give her a shop to run, and the shop promptly burns down, and she does to try to collect the insurance money, but it's so obviously arson that she is sentenced to 2 years at a very famous place in Pennsylvania, the Eastern State Penitentiary.
Wow, so yeah, lesson learned. Never let Lizzie Haliday look after your shop.
Yep. Or her own shop in this case.
Or her own shop in this case. Yeah, okay. Couple years now. Okay, we're finally seeing some jail time here for Lizzie Haliday. All right.
Yeah, but she goes straight to the Eastern State Penitentiary. She does not see psychiatric at this point. Now, I do want to go back to New York City for a moment. I forgot this fact. She had a reputation, before she left New York City, of being very violent already. People were scared of her on the street.
Yeah.
So you got to say, as a teenager, she was already showing extremely violent signs. And then, goes to Pennsylvania, and then she starts marry a guy, less than 2 years. They disappear or die or take off, or she takes off.
Right.
Except for the burning of her own shop.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't say she waited till the will was changed and then kill him. There's been no mention of financial gain with any of these fellas.
Financial motivation just doesn't seem to be an element with Lizzie Haliday.
Right. But I will point this out. The majority of them, I would say, were vulnerable males. A lot of them were widowers already.
Men at risk.
Men at risk. They were older than she was. So, okay, maybe she was like the caretaker murder attitude. She was trying to take care of these men and then kill them, which is a possibility. But I'm going to say they were the more vulnerable because they all were older than she was. The only one who wasn't was Charles Playstill, which she took off after 2 weeks. He was the only one close to her age that she married, or hooked up with, whatever she did at that point. Okay, so apparently after she gets out of the Eastern State Penitentiary, there's another death attributed to her. The name is Peddler Hutch. I couldn't get any information on that. Was not a husband. Just sounds like a random person she killed. Was this the person in Ireland? I don't know. Like I said, there's a mention of her killing somebody in Ireland.
Won't be the first or the last with Lizzie Haliday.
Yeah, but I'm not sure at this point. All I know is I have a name, and she may have killed him.
Right.
But then she becomes a housekeeper in the Catskills in Sullivan County to a Paul Haliday. Hires her on as a housekeeper. He's a widower. He has 5 children. 4 have moved on, started their own families. the one child that's still living, his name is John.
Well, they say that he was mentally challenged.
Mentally challenged or physically crippled. I've heard two different descriptions.
Yeah. Okay.
So she's hired to be the housekeeper for Paul, and he's 40 years older than her. Again,
there is a huge age discrepancy there. But that's not uncommon, even now.
Yeah.
You know, for people to marry somebody.
His older children didn't like her. And the neighbors didn't like her. There was something off. They, they knew immediately there was something off about her.
Their BS alarms were going off with Lizzie.
Majorly. So, but Paul falls in love with her and marries her. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So, she marries him in 1890. God, she moved quickly.
I'll tell you, man, she moves fast.
Now, I want to stop here. A lot of the newspaper illustrations of her, a lot of the descriptions for her were not very flattering. Now, they did come out after these last murders we're about to get into. But at the same token, the physical description of her, she was...
Oh, yes.
She was not a beauty. She was not a beauty queen.
She was described as very manly features.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. She built like a pro wrestler, a female pro wrestler, and from my descriptions I heard of her.
But small.
Small, but very stocky. Somebody you would want as a housekeeper around you. Somebody who would be good on a farm,
Yeah.
But she wasn't a looker, but yet somehow she was able to charm these guys and get them married. I think she was picking on the vulnerable men.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Anyway, so she marries Paul, and in 1891, a year after they're married, she burns their house.
And then? The barn.
Burns the barn 2 weeks later with John inside, killing him.
There's the vaporization, folks.
Yeah. He was burned to death, definitely was iron again. She also, at this point, stole her husband's horses and took them to be sold. She's arrested, and this time gone to a mental asylum in Middletown. She's only there for a couple months. She's released. The doctor says, oh, she's fine. She goes back to live with Paul, and, well, things aren't right. The neighbors start getting suspicious. Where's Paul? A few weeks after she comes back. Oh, he went and he's doing
he did masonry work.
He's doing masonry work down in Burlington.
Yeah, right.
And they're like, okay, well, where's your other housekeepers at? Because at one point, Paul hired two other women who Lizzie knew.
Yeah, because Lizzie had stayed with these other two women. Yes. What were their names again?
Their names were Margaret McQuillan and Sarah Jane McQuillan.
Exactly. Lizzie knew wasn't she at their house working as a housekeeper for them as well?
Wait a second here. Let me back up a bit.
What's she the relationship
them.
here?
They were friends.
Okay.
Yes, they were the ones who set her up in the shop in Philadelphia. So
the shop that she burnt down herself?
The shop she burned down. So, yes. Now the neighbors are like, well,
but then they came back into her life after all that?
They did, yes.
Oh, my goodness sakes. How naive.
And they're like, well, where's your husband? And she's like, he's on a masonry job. Okay. Where are your workers at? I don't know. They took off,
Shrugs.
They're
just getting shrugs from Lizzie at this point.
So, like I said, the neighbors didn't like her. So they call the cops. Cops show up to investigate, and they find the two women in the barn.
Ooh.
Dead.
Okay. Interesting situation, though, as to how the police found them.
Oh, yes.
Okay, they went into the barn that wasn't burnt down.
Yep.
All right. And they found a new wall of hay. And so they removed that, thinking they were going to find her husband. But oh, no.
No.
They found the two bodies.
The two women, yes.
The bodies of the two women that she known in Philadelphia.
The hands were bound in front of them. And I can't remember how they died, though.
Hands were bound in front of them. Knees and ankles were also bound.
Right.
And didn't she shoot them or something
I can't remember. But they were found under the hay. What if she put them there and threw the hay on top of them and suffocated them that way? I'm not sure. No, you're right. Yeah. On September 4th, the bodies of the two women were found. Both had been shot.
Because they did find an empty casing in the house.
Right. Now, when Lizzie was questioned after they found the bodies, she began to behave in an erratic manner, tears at her clothes, and talking incoherently. So now the cops take her away from the scene to hold her, and they're all like, boy, that was convenient that she kind of went crazy when they started confronting her about the bodies, right? But then, well, where's her husband? So
exactly, yeah.
It takes him a couple days They finally get into the house. There's carpet full of blood.
Yep.
And they find his body buried under the floorboards of his house. He'd been shot and his head crushed.
And the reason why they were able to get into the kitchen was because of the odor.
Yes, the odor.
The stench from the body.
Yep.
Bear that in mind. You know, even if you bury a body under a couple feet of soil, that body's going to decompose and that smell is going to leach up through the soil.
In fact, there was a case, I can't remember the name of the case, where the fact that this child had disappeared, but 10 days later was found in their bedroom dead.
Ooh.
But the question was, why didn't anybody smell the decomposition at that point? That was what alerted to the police that the body had been moved. Because they had been in there. They would have smelt the body prior to that 10 days.
Yes.
Like I said, I can't remember which case this was. So they had proof the body had been moved and brought back to the bedroom to be conveniently found. And that was enough for them to go after the stepfather, I think it was. I can't remember which case it was, but it was the fact that the lack of smell, when it should have been there, was enough for them to go, wait a minute, we searched that room, there wasn't even a hint of a dead body, and with the days we were in there, it should have been smelling.
Absolutely.
And when they...
Leaching, melting, leaching of fluids, you know, the whole night.
Yeah, so, and she's in the sheriff's department, and she's not a model prisoner for them at all. She rips off her clothes, she screams, she tries to kill herself with one of her garters. She went after the sheriff's wife and tried to kill her.
She bit the sheriff.
Well, I haven't got to the part where she bit the sheriff, that's later on. You see?
Bit the sheriff.
So we'll get to the teeth, we'll get to the biting.
Oh,
later,
okay.
But no, this is pre-trial. She's doing all this stuff. She tries slitting her throat, say, "Oh, I didn't know if I could bleed," and it was just off the wall behavior, all prior to trial.
Wow.
She set fire to her own bed as well. So this is all pre-trial. Oh. And all this makes for great press. And you can tell...
Oh, for sure. I bet they sold massive amounts of copy.
The newspaper article I started with, this is after she finally makes it into the mental institution for her last days, and she's still making press. But boy, people were all over this story.
The aforementioned story about the false teeth, for instance.
Yes.
Yeah. Just an example of her popularity as a serial killer celebrity.
And that's what, she starts talking about her previous husbands. Now they open up the cases of her previous husbands. And so she is probably responsible at this time for at least 6 deaths. With 4 just in the last month or so before she's arrested for the final time. And at least 2 of the previous husbands, possibly more.
That's a lot of murder.
And the first time that's the first time you hear the claim that she killed some man in Belfast. Now, if she did it when she was a child, and she was 3 years old, I'm impressed. Or somehow she stuck back to Belfast, and, it wasn't like taking a jet plane into this town.
No, it was all steamships. It would take at least a couple of weeks.
Right.
Isambard Kingdom Burnell made it in 14 days.
Yeah.
So it's possible.
On his own steamship. On his
own steamship.
So... Well, she is found guilty, and they're going to be moving her to Danmora, and I'm going to read about that a little bit more. Danmora may sound familiar to some of you. Anyway, that's when she bit the sheriff. She did bite him, and he got an infection from the bite.
And died.
And died from it. So you could say she murdered another
one. Yeah, exactly.
So the sheriff... Yeah, it's been 3 to 4 weeks since the scratch began to itch and burn. A few nights ago, the sheriff was awakened by severe pain in the injured member, and since then, he suffered acutely. So that was before he passed away.
Human bites are so septic.
Oh my gosh, yes. And
you just can't screw around with a human bite. Don't ever.
And remember I said she was going to be brought to Danmora. So this is her first trip, and she is not at an insane asylum. She was found guilty of murder. In fact, sentenced for the electric chair. She would have been the first woman in the United States killed by the electric chair.
Oh, dear. Hey, excuse me if I go off like Walter. They're going to kill that poor woman. Oh, dear.
But... But
yeah, well, you got to think, this is still, late 19th century.
Yeah.
This isn't the sort of thing, isn't the sort of treatment you show a lady, that sort of thing. Oh. But we're not talking about a lady. This is Lizzie.
Lizzie, yes. Who ends up in Danmora. Oh, why does that name sound familiar to some of yours? Because recently there was a wonderful miniseries called Escape from Danmora, which was about one of the most expensive and most recent prison escapes in the New York State Department of Corrections. Danmora prison really hasn't changed that much since the time Lizzie was brought there. It's not a woman's prison.
No.
This is one of the high-security ones, and there's a good reason why it's a high-security. If you've seen the miniseries where they filmed actually at the prison, there's nothing to escape to. Even the recent escape, they ended up running around in the northern Adirondack Mountains.
Yes, exactly.
With task force from the Department of Corrections chasing, the State Patrol chasing. They had the Canadian Mounties down there.
Yeah, with no compass or knowledge of navigating by the stars.
So this is a desolate prison, and she was brought there on purpose. I'm going to read you the article. It's pretty short. This is from the Sullivan County Record on July 6, 1894. At Danmora, Miss Haliday confined in a cage and constantly watched by two matrons. So Miss Lizzie Haliday, the Sullivan County murderess, was received in Clinton Prison Friday morning, being the first woman ever confined within that institution. Wow.
First time for everything.
Yeah, she was accompanied by Sheriff Beecher, whom she bites.
Poor Beecher.
And Deputy Rice and Miss Osborne, a matron from the insane asylum at Matewan. At the prison, she was received as an ordinary prisoner, except for the two matrons who took charge of her instead of the male officers. She did not answer any questions, and the sheriff volunteered the information for them. After Miss Haliday was bathed and her clothing changed, she was taken to the condemned cell, where the matrons will watch her and care for her wants. A male guard will be within calling at all time. The cell occupied by Miss Haliday is different from any others in the prison. It is in the center of the condemned room and is constructed of iron bars from floor to ceiling, making it merely an open cage where the prisoner may be seen at all times. Everyone who saw the prisoner, with the exception of the Stillwater County officers, pronounced her a mad woman. Wow. So this, she's stuck in an all-male prison in a cage like an animal. But up to this point, she really hasn't shown any behavior. I hate to say it. At the mindset of people at this time, that's what you do. Throw her in a cage. I mean, they had to shackle her to the floor of the county jail to stop her from acting out at one point. So this...
Well, you got to do what you got to do to keep your personnel who are handling such dangerous persons safe.
Yeah.
Can't really take chances because Sheriff Beecher is a good example. He got bit on the hand.
Yep.
The wound went septic and he dies from it.
Yep.
It's kind of, especially after you've faced down, I don't know how many dangers, maybe. I don't know where Beecher was in his career. That's really not how you want to go.
Right.
Basically.
So, an article right next to the one I just read is called A Sister of Mrs. Haliday. Says Lizzie has been insane for some times back. And I'm just going to paraphrase. One of her sisters comes forward and finally admits, that's my sister Lizzie. And gives examples where they knew she was crazy from day one. And she mentions that, there were family members who had been institutionalized. Their father also had fits. And she goes into describing some things.
So family history. There
was a family history of insanity. And talking about fits that Lizzie would have growing up. And the fact she attacked this particular sister at one point when they were growing up. I mean, very violently. But one of the strangest things that her sister talks about is when their father died, Lizzie tried to dig him out of the ground.
Absolutely
incredible. It took
incredible.
3 people to pull her off his grave to make her stop. That's a reaction I've never heard of before. Seriously?
She definitely had separation anxiety issues.
Oh, man. So, it's...
as will be illustrated later on in the episode.
And this is the first time, around this time, that's where the theory came out that she was Jack the Ripper. If you look at the timeline of the Ripper murders, there's no way. There's no way she could have been in the Catskill region of New York and in London at the same time the murders were occurring. There's no way. because burning the barns happened about the time one of the murders did happen in Whitechapel. So,
but she made constant references.
Yes, she was
to
obsessed
the Ripper
with those.
murders.
She was obsessed with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that led to that short belief that she was Jack the Ripper, which would be interesting. It would be an interesting twist. We are going to discuss somebody else later who possibly was Jack the Ripper, and there's more corresponding evidence about that particular person. But definitely, I would take Lizzie out of the running.
Okay.
Yeah, take her out of there. There's just no way. Even though they try to say, "Oh yeah, she was there at the time," it would take a while and steam shifting between the two.
Yeah.
Now, she was sentenced to death on August 6th that same year, but government intervened. There was a special commission put together. They went over her records from the mental asylum. They approached the governor, and the governor decided, no, we're not going to execute her, but she's going to spend the rest of her life in an insane asylum. And that's where she ends up in Matawan State Asylum. She tries to commit suicide. She tries to escape. She assaults one matron with another inmate assisting her. That first matron fought her off. Okay? But then she finally, calms down and starts becoming a model inmate. And that's all attributed to this one particular nurse named Nellie Wicks. And Lizzie really liked her. And a lot of people liked her. She was like one of the youngest matrons. She was really good at her job. She really had a good positive influence on the inmates there. But, you work at a job for a while, you get stale, or you need something different.
Ms. Wicks was looking to move up in her career as a healthcare provider.
So she was going to be a private nurse. And she goes and tells everybody she's leaving, and Lizzie's like, no, you're not. Wicks doesn't take that as a threat. And just before Nellie was supposed to leave for good, Lizzie follows her into the bathroom and stabs her 200 times with a pair of scissors. They asked Lizzie, why did you do it? You liked her. And Lizzie's like, I didn't want her to leave me.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the only one where we get Lizzie saying what her motivation was. I didn't want her to leave. And you sounded like she had separation anxiety. Severe separation anxiety. That death happened in September 27th, 1906. Lizzie lives on for 12 more years and then dies at Matawan. That's her in a nutshell. Well, if you're hoping to go visit her grave, you're out of luck. There are no names on the headstones, just numbers. So they have to match up the numbers to any surviving historical records. They do have the number there. So if you do want to go visit her grave for whatever reason, it is available to see. You just have to find her number. And I got that information off of Find a Grave, which is another great source.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was Lizzie's life. Like I said, I'm surprised more true crime people haven't covered her. Thank you, Briefcase, for doing that. But like I said, he does a lot of historical ones, so this was right up his alley. I'm shocked she's not more well-known than Lizzie Borden, really, because of her crimes. And they are very unusual for a female. Was it the caretaker? Was it the separation anxiety? And they got more and more violent. She probably started out just poisoning.
She may have had a multi-layered psychosis going on there or something like that.
She starts
I'm no
out
psychologist, but yeah.
She starts out poisoning and ends up with shooting. Serial killers usually don't change their MO. She did.
Absolutely.
So, was she... Okay, here's the question. Was she crazy? You're nodding. Yeah, she was crazy.
You're right. She was. More than likely was insane. Yeah.
Okay, how much of this was...
Definitely mentally unstable.
Do you think this all was an act, or do you think some of it was an act, or...
I think part of it was probably an act. The exhibition that she gave the police upon being arrested, the antics that she went through while in the jails and insane asylums, various ones.
How she behaved with the crowd, too.
Exactly, yeah.
She did kind of crave attention for a bit there, too.
Yeah, she did, yeah.
Yeah. Again, that's why I say she's more closer to Warhouse. How do you say her name?
Starts with a W.
Yeah, she killed all those men in Florida. And I got true crime people screaming at their speakers right now. But that's where I think she's closer to that woman than
murderess of the Florida Keys.
Yeah,
or something.
But Yeah, she was deemed the worst woman on earth for years because of these murders. And really, we're going to be discussing some more female killers. I mean, we had that horrible one we talked about last season.
Oh, yes.
But she was your typical, I hate to say it, kind of your typical female serial killer. Lizzie definitely wasn't.
But for Woonwos,
yeah,
or whatever her name was, I think that's it, Woonwos, was the female serial killer who specifically targeted men for murder. So there is an example of that.
Well, yeah, and in her case, there was definitely a threat at one point, but whether the rest of them were threats or not, we don't know. She perceived him as a threat.
She used that.
But Lizzie here, I mean, she kills 3 women.
There's no pattern.
Yeah. Other than she married these guys, but like I said, okay, well, maybe she was a Black Widow killer. Like, that's a pretty common female stereotype.
But then there's leavings and goings and all kinds of things.
And obviously nothing helped her financially in all this.
No,
the only time
no financial motivation.
we hear her ever trying to collect money is when she burns down her own house, or her own shop.
Right.
That is the only time we hear any financial...
And that applies for the insurance payout.
That's right. Yeah, after she killed her last... when she was in jail, she applied for his Army pension. That's
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Thank you for mentioning that. So, okay, 2 cases where we have proof that there might have been motivation by money. But we don't have proof about the other ones. And what would be the motivation for money to kill the 2 women?
Forensic pathology and police work back then
was just at the start.
In the late 19th century isn't what it is now.
Right. It was just starting to come into the modern.
So nowadays she would have gotten caught
within
the first couple of murders.
The thing was, the one we almost covered was a good example of how science changed within a few years and saved the guys.
Exactly.
We'll cover that one later, but yeah, you're talking about the forensics and that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was, from our perspective, the law enforcement officials seem a bit clueless.
But then again, you weren't talking to other places. It wasn't until she said, "Oh yeah, I was married before," the people went, "You were?"
Right.
We don't have the. There wasn't a data.
There wasn't a database where you could run her name, where you could run her number. And as she was in the United States, did she become a citizen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she came. So she would have wound up with an SSI number.
Oh, they didn't have Social Security then.
Exactly, but I'm telling you, just putting it in modern perspective, they would have been able to run her number and find out all this stuff on the database.
Right.
They didn't have that back then.
No.
There's no way. They didn't even have it between the law enforcement in Ireland and the people we had over here.
Though. I really don't think she did it.
Don't think so?
I think that was all made up to make her look tougher.
Oh, yeah?
Well, I killed this guy in Belfast. When were you 3? What?
Funny.
Oh, but
the thing is, she hopped around, though. I mean, she went from Philadelphia back to
Vermont, and New York State, New York City.
Auburn?
She was in the Auburn Mental Asylum for a while, too, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so she did get around, mainly in hospitals. But
so, nobody had complete records on her.
Right. So, wow, but she is a character, definitely. And I am surprised she got, people don't talk about her more, really. It just really surprises me. And, I feel sorry for the son. God knows what happened to him. He just kind of disappeared. They didn't record his name anywhere. He's just listed as son. But that was institutionalized. Well, where was the institution? No record of it.
Just lost in the system.
Yeah. He could have been in Vermont. He could have been in Pennsylvania. We don't know. So,
You've been beaten to death by nuns? Who knows?
Oh, shit. This lady, I tell you. Yeah, I do agree she was the worst woman on earth at that point. But I would be interested to have, like, a modern crime psychologist or a criminal profile go through her case and say, where are the points?
It is interesting because she is a murderer whose profile jumps the tracks.
Yep.
So often. She goes to kids, to other women, to men, then back...
I did find an article where some psychology students did do that, and they used the website, the Murderpedia, or Murdercyclopedia, I think it's called. But she's not listed on there. And I wonder if she would have thrown... I know, I went and looked. She's not listed on there, which surprised me. I think she would have thrown for a loop.
Absolutely.
I really do.
I think that's probably why they keep her off because she is such an enigma.
Yeah, well, but yet she killed, like I said, at least 6 people, possibly more.
Yeah.
And we don't really know what her motivations was.
Passers-by.
There was only 2 people, 2 things. Money was mentioned. Unless it was that severe separation anxiety when she showed him her father was buried. She tries to dig him out of the ground. What did every one of these guys say they were going to kick her to the curb or they were leaving, and so she decided, no, you're not. You're going to stay. I'm going to kill you.
Was it a slow build-up to murder, or was it a specific trigger?
I don't know. I mean, she was mentioned as being violent when she was a teenager.
So volatile.
Yeah, she was she was heading down this path way before. There were warning signs. But, nobody caught him back then.
Of course not. No, it wasn't a study back then.
Right.
Like it is now.
Okay, but I think we talked about her enough. So that was the interesting and definitely ghastly life.
The dangerous life of
Lizzie
Haliday. Thank you for listening very much to our ghastly podcast.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Podcasts, and CastBox. Please like, share, and review on your favorite platform. Unearthly Upstate is an Animator Liar production. The show is produced by Mari and Matt Manette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing by Mari Manette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Unless otherwise stated in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast are not paid or contact us for any type of promotion. Please check out our webpage for credit and sources for the episode. Thank you.